let's get started. There's 10 of us here and people are checking in. Sounds good. I think I wanted to start by introducing myself. I'm Ryan from How to ADU, and I just wanted to thank you all for taking the time to come out and share this the first ever shelter in place webinar with How to ADU and BuildZig. I think it means a lot to me that I get to help in your ADU projects, and I really appreciate you guys spending some time with us today. On that note, I want to introduce a couple special guests. Um, I think overall, one thing that I've learned while reading through your queries and speaking with you guys in person is that every project, oh, got some more people coming on. Every project is unique. You're all at different stages of the projects and you all have really good questions. And so I wanted to get you in front of some subject matter experts while we're all kind of stuck at home anyway. And I found I just think you're gonna really enjoy sharing experience with Laura, Blair, and Carlos Plazola from BuildZig. Laura's a real planning expert, member of the California Bar, Berkeley grad, and the COO at BuildZig. Carlos is got some real construction chops. He's a general contractor with a ton of experience in both the city of Oakland and under Jerry Brown's administration, an official government advisor, and I think both, and now the CEO of BuildZig, and they're both just a wealth of knowledge with decades of experience at a company that's helped a lot of people build their projects. So thank you both for coming, and I'll hand it.
Whoops, just lost you. Ryan, I can't hear.
I think Ryan was passing it off anyhow. So I think that the next step was going to be, Carlos, you were going to explain what the all the rules for Zoom and how we're going to interact on this call. Would you be able to take that away?
I can. I just want to make sure that folks can hear me. If you can, just any of you type yes into the chat box there.
Great.
And perfect. Thank you. All right. So nice to meet all of you. I'm Carlos Plazola with BuildZig Development Services. We help people get their projects from start to finish. Laura will give more of an overview. But my role here, other than answering questions as they may relate to the process, is just informing folks how to facilitate their experience here on, or how to have a good experience here on this webinar. So for those who have not used Zoom extensively, and I have a feeling that the entire global population is becoming very familiar with Zoom very quickly, if you click on the participants icon down at the bottom, if you hover over the part of the bottom of your screen, it should pop up and the little thing says participants. If you click on that, on your screen will pop up the names of the participants. And then on the bottom right of that, it says raise hand. So if you wanted to chat, you can either literally raise your hand like this, but most of you aren't interested in having your face on video, which is fine. Then just click that button and it'll show like this. It'll show a raised hand, and then Ryan or Laura will know that you want to talk. And then you click lower hand if you want to lower your hand. If you have noise in the background, then you just hit the mute button, or if you want to talk, hit and unhit your mute at the bottom left. And if you just want to ask a question and you don't really want to be heard, you don't want to talk, you just want to lay low, relax, listen, then you could just type your question into the chat box at any time. So let's say you say, how much does it cost to build a foundation for a 300 square foot accessory dwelling unit about? And then you just drop that into the chat box at the bottom. It'll come up, and then you type it in, how much for a foundation. And then we'll get to the questions towards the end of this call I think the last portion is question answers. So that's the basics of it. And if you do have questions about process, feel free to drop it in the chat box. I will be checking the chat box to see if there's any process questions that we need to address as we go on. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you, Carlos. Hey. So, first of all, I want to thank everybody for, in addition to Ryan's comments, I want to thank everybody for participating today. I think that obviously in the context of everything that's happening, it's hard to know where to spend your time and how to manage yourself. And I think that this is a good use of time for, because being able to plan and figure out how you're able to build your ADU is really important, both in the global context and the context of us. We will continue to need housing even after COVID and after the shelter in place is lifted. And a lot of the front end work is planning and doing research. So the purpose of this webinar, and I really thank Ryan for setting this up, is to enable folks to feel empowered to get their questions answered. I have had a chance to speak to a few of you, and was commenting to Ryan that lots of you have already done a significant amount of research, and when you have questions, there are things that go beyond what you'd be able to find by Googling. And so we're here today to really be able to get into those kind of detailed questions, but also provide a more broad overview, because sometimes that's kind of hard to keep in mind when you're deep in research. So the first part that we, Ryan went over our backgrounds a little bit, but maybe Carlos and I can introduce ourselves in more detail. We are the owners of BuildZig, which is a company that helps people build ADUs and has been doing construction for over 15 years. We help people from site assessment to getting their permits all the way through to completion of construction. And we have additional staff. My personal expertise is in the land use side. I'm a land use, my educational background is as a land use attorney, and I started working in the city of Oakland, where I actually represented the building and planning departments when I first came out of law school. Since then, Carlos and I have been working together and have been managing I've been managing the planning process and working through getting permits. So that's my area of expertise. And I'll pass it on to Carlos so he can explain his overall experience and his experience in construction.
Yeah, so I've built projects for clients, and for our own company, we've built probably close to 100 projects in the last 10 years. And it's ranged everything from small additions to mid-rises to manufacturing facilities. We also do our own entitlements. So we've also entitled a number of projects for clients over the last 15 years. And entitlements, for those who are unfamiliar, is simply acquisition of planning approvals and building permits. And that's sort of the pre-construction side of construction. So we've done everything from A to Z on construction projects, development projects. We started specializing 10 years ago on consumer projects, which were the smaller projects specifically for consumers that oftentimes are unfamiliar with the all of the keywords, the buzzwords, the acronyms, or the process for getting things built. So Laura and I, because we came out of government, very much enjoyed working with consumers or constituents. So this is pretty natural for us to work with folks who are not professional developers and help them get through the process. Our company was built on that. So when the ADU process started hitting last year, we spent a lot of time getting to know it and helping people get through that process. And we've helped get about 100 projects through the first phases of approvals at this in the ADU realm. So thank you.
Thank you. So we wanted to ask you all a few questions just to get to know you a little bit and where you're coming from so we can orient our presentation and also our questions. So I'm going to do a short optional survey, and this is how it's going to go. I will ask a question, and if you feel up to it, you will type your answer in the chat box, and then we'll kind of be able to orient the presentation that way. So we're gonna get started. So the first question is, where is the property that you want to develop located? So if you feel like sharing, great. Excellent. And I'm going to go to the next question, which is, let's see. Are you looking, so there's, we can consider ADUs, two different types of ADUs. You're either converting existing space, so there's like a garage or a basement, or you're looking for a completely separate unit. For those of you that are responding today, could you let me know if you're looking at converting existing space or you're looking for a detached unit? Great. And just a few more questions. Could you let us know why are you adding the unit? And to give some context, if you're looking to have a rental unit, you might have different needs than somebody that's looking to house a family member like grandma. And that'll go from you, what kind of finishes that you have and what other kind of arrangements and how you orient the unit. So that would be helpful to know. Okay, great. Last question is, what is your biggest concern when you're thinking about the process or the concept of building an ADU? What is your biggest concern for you?
I'll say as folks type in here, I'll give some examples of some of the things we've heard just to spark. Is that okay, Laura?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So a number of folks are concerned about, of course, cost is always an issue. But then it's also how long, length of time it'll take to get approvals. There's a complicated approval process, and that's, the unexpected, really. There's cost overruns. There's the headache of working with contractors or architects. Sometimes can get a bit daunting if you don't do it every day. So there's complexity of the process. These are some of the things that we've often heard from people.
Great. Well, thank you all for participating in that. That helps me orient the brief presentation we're going to do here. So I'm going to give an overview of what the ADU building process is and the steps there. And then we'll go straight to questions and answers, which I know is something that everybody wants to get to. Obviously the state of California really instituted a game changer in January 2020, making it a lot easier for people to build ADUs in terms of knowing what's allowable and not allowable, what effectively happened was the state declared a state of emergency for the purposes of housing. And so they overrode certain restrictions in lots of places that were preventing people from getting ADUs, or onerous fees and processes that made it very difficult. But there's still a lot to navigate even in that context, in terms of the steps. So the overall big picture steps of what it is to get an ADU is the first thing, which you're all, I think, I've had a chance to speak to a lot of you going through, which is the due diligence phase. In that phase, you're looking at what is the cost to build, how much of that can I finance? If you're renting, you want to know how much rent can I get for a particular unit, and what team do I need to get together in order to build this, and also what somebody mentioned, which was timeline. Excuse me. So once you understand what you can afford and what your return on investment is going to be, or if that meets your needs, and have a sense of your cost, you're able to start to go through the process. The next step in the process after you've done your due diligence, so you have the cost and you have the financing, and those two things align, then you're gonna start to get your permits. And I'm gonna go into more detail into each of these steps, wanted to explain them broadly. The next step is getting your permits. In some jurisdictions, you still have to get a planning permit or planning approval. And then you get a building permit. You have to work with design professionals in order to get that plan so that the city can confirm that you've met all of the requirements. After you get your permits, your last step is actually constructing the ADU, and then you get final sign off, and you're done with the project. So that's the big picture of the big three steps of getting your ADU, which is due diligence, permits, and the build process. I wanted to go. The phase that people tend to neglect the most is the due diligence phase and the permitting phase. People know about that you have to, in order to have an ADU, you have to actually construct it. But understanding what is involved with the due diligence, and in particular the planning and the permits, is often kind of is invisible to folks. And that's where folks have had a lot of questions. Because maybe you have already had a remodel in your bathroom or something like that, and you've had to hire somebody to actually perform that work. So the first step in doing your due diligence is contacting your bank and figuring out how you're going to finance it and what your overall construction budget is. And then you need to figure out what you want to build and get a general sense of whether of what that cost is going to be. How we do it at BuildZig is we do provide folks with a general cost assessment of how much it'll cost for them to do it, so they to construct what they want to construct, so that they know whether or not what they've been approved for in their loan or what they've saved up for matches those two amounts. And we're able to help people kind of negotiate that in terms of, oh, I've only been approved for $150. I wanted this thing and it costs $250. Is there any way to get from here to there? So that's what we do with a site assessment. Part of what we do with the site assessment is providing some cost information there. So after you've contacted your bank and you've gotten a general assessment of cost, and I want to add that our general assessment of what a budget is depending on what you want to build. The general cost of construction is between $200 and $500 a square foot. And the biggest cost factors with in building an ADU, which gets you closer to the 200 and or closer or farther away from the 200 or the 500, is efficiency of processing. So whether or not you have you have to have your design team respond to a lot of comments, the type of construction that you end up doing, the foundation needs. So obviously if you're building on a flat lot, which might be different from building on a lot on a hill where you have to have piers, and also the utility demands. Those are all of the biggest cost considerations. So I'm going to say those again, just so you caught that. It's efficiency of processing, type of construction, foundation, and utility demands are really the things that are the variables that you have to consider in that 200 to 500 foot a foot price range. So the in the permitting process, so once you've got a general sense of your budget, and now you're able to work on figuring out what is allowable in your on your particular lot. And in California, there aren't a lot of limitations on what you are generally able to build a ADU. You just have to figure out how it's going to be oriented and what size it's going to be and whether it's going to be able to meet your needs. And that is, again, something that BuildZig is able to help with in terms of a site assessment and helping you navigate that and figuring out what size of a unit you want to build and whether or not, how far you can build into your existing setbacks, for instance, and such. Lots of folks think that they need to hire an architect to help them submit their plans. And it's important to know that you can go with an architect, and there are lots of architects that have already created pre-vetted plans that you just select from, and there's a price associated with that, and that's a fairly reasonable way to go. You can also work with a designer, and designers generally cost less because they don't have the architecture's license, so they don't have the ability to charge as much. And then you work with an engineer to help you, who actually stamps your plans and helps you submit them to the city. And so there's 2 steps in getting your permits. In some cases, there's some sort of planning review, and then you're also getting your, if that's not required, you still need to submit plans to the building department. And so you're still working with your designer or architect, you're working with a structural engineer for your foundation, and you also will need what's called a Title 24 report. And the Title 24 report reports to the reviewing jurisdiction, the city, that you have, that it meets the energy efficiency guidelines. So your team is going to be an architect or designer, a structural engineer for the foundation, and a Title 24 report. And you also may need, in some instances, an additional MEP engineer for utilities. And that's your team that helps you put together everything for either your planning and building application or just your building application. When we were talking about one of the ways that cost considerations is, you want to make sure that your team puts together a solid application so that you don't get lots of comments, because that's where you get change orders from your vendors. So you only want, the city always has some comments, but you want to be able to not have to respond to multiple rounds of comments, because that causes lots of delay, and you also could get a change order from your vendor. So after you have submitted for the planning and building permit and you finally get approval, another step that folks don't always consider ahead of time, but is really important, is that you have to apply for your utilities to connect your unit. So you have to contact all of your utility companies, including water, sewer, gas, and electrical, to make sure that you're able to connect into the unit. Connect to the existing service. Once you have approved building plans, you bid that project out to the general contractor. You want to have those plans in place before you actually contract with your contractor, so that you are both on the same page about what they are building, and they should provide you with a line item budget. So not just like, oh, it'll cost you $250,000, but what a line item budget is in the construction industry is a budget that shows you how much they're going to spend on each line, each kind of area of construction. So it might be plumbing, framing, and etc. But you want that line item budget, which allows you to really assess their bills when they come back. because oh, framing was done. They said that they were going to spend $20,000 on framing, $50,000 on framing. Now I can approve that line item. So you want that line item budget. The general contractor should also provide you with a construction schedule and a payment schedule so that you know what you're paying when, and when they're, and you want this as part of your contract when they're saying that you're going to be, when they're going to be complete. Once you actually get your, once you have a line item budget, you have your contract, you have your general contractor, and you have your permits, the last step is to actually go through the construction process. When you go through the construction process, you want the general contractor to pull the permit under their name. You want to track your payments, and you want to track them against progress. So you wouldn't pay a 50% retainer up front if they haven't built anything. So you really want to make sure that if they're asking for 10% of the overall construction budget, that 10% of the work is being done. We generally recommend, and the best construction finance practice is to hold back a 10% retention until the final building permit is received. So if they give you a bill for $100, you're going to give them 90. You hold back that $10 until all the way through the project, because sometimes when people have warranties and kind of what are called punch list items, which are those little nicky-nacky things that you want done, the contractor's already moved on to his other job or their other job, and they are they're not incentivized to come back and do that work. So what you want to do is hold back that retention until they're ready, until they've completed the project. And the last step is to make sure that your contractor gives you all of the warranties that are required under their license, and that they come back and do their warranty work. So that's the kind of quick overview of what the process is. And I guess now we're going to open it up to questions. I am not excellent at Zoom. I see that maybe Carlos, would you be able to moderate when people are asking questions, and then we can.
Yeah, if you all would just, if you have a question, just either, if we can see you on the screen, just do this. Raise your hand, that is. If we can't see you on the screen, then just click that raise hand button on the right, and then we'll just go in order. And then if you prefer, you can just write your question out, and we'll answer it on there. So there's 3 different ways of asking a question. 1, raise your hand by video. 2 is on the right-hand corner, raise hand, or type it in, and I'll do my best to facilitate.
Thank you.
I think Dennis had his hand raised while you were talking.
Okay.
Dennis, do you want to pop it in the chat, or do you want me to give you the screen? I'll give you both options. Oh, maybe not. Anybody else? I think we've also got some write-in questions if we want to start off with those.
Yeah, let's start with those.
Get people over the first question syndrome.
Hey, Ryan, this is Mike. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mike.
Hey, hi, Mike.
Hi, great. I can't find the raise hand button, but I do have one question. I think a lot of people have questions about costs, and just trying to drill down into that a little bit more. That $200 to $500 a square foot range. We talked about a lot of the pieces to the puzzle here. I'm just trying to get an understanding of what that is inclusive of. Is it the estimate that includes, the architectural drawings and that sort of thing, as well as the construction piece, or what does that include and what may that exclude, I guess?
Carlos, would you be able to handle that one?
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's a big range. $200 to $500 is a pretty big range. So if you're doing a 700 square foot unit at $500 is $350,000. at the high end, 140 on the low end. That should be able to include all of your utility connections, your fees, basically all in, which would include your design fees, your management, project management, construction management, general contracting, city fees. So the $500 up top end is certainly all inclusive. And the $200 can be as well, depending on what you build. And on the 200, there's not a lot of things that you can build for $200 a square foot. But there are some products out there that you can do for $200 a square foot all in.
Or if it's sorry, go ahead.
I was wondering, like, what would be something that would come in at $200? That just sounds, so inexpensive.
Yeah. So let's take a 500 square foot accessory dwelling unit at $200 would be $100,000 all in, and that would be a cast in place foundation. So prefab foundation and prefab unit. So it would be something like a modular prefabricated unit that you could haul on a truck on site and drop in place. And there are some manufacturers of those. Typically, when you get to that low end, it's going to be modular prefab.
Or Carlos, would it also include when somebody's converting an existing space that already has a foundation?
Yeah, thank you. So if you're doing, thank you, Laura. I always assume detached, so you have to bring me back. If you're doing a basement, and let's say you have a 500 square foot basement, you already have, and it's above grade, so you don't have to worry about waterproofing. So it's just building out the interior space. Then certainly you can get to $200 a square foot, particularly depending on your finishes. If you're going to be renting it and you don't need high-end finishes, then you can get it to $200 a square foot. If it's below grade, then you might go up a bit more to $250 a square foot. And if you're substantially below grade, where you need new retaining walls and waterproofing beneath your slab and retaining walls, then you're probably closer to $300 a square foot. So converting a garage would also get you near the low end because presumably you already have your slab in place for your garage. And then it's just insulating and doing your mechanical, electrical, plumbing work and building in your demising walls. So taking an existing space and that already has foundation and doing a conversion to an ADU, you'd be near the lower end.
Does that make sense, Mike?
Yeah, that was helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think too, those are extreme ends of the spectrum, right? And there's a bunch of numbers in between. You don't end up having to pigeonhole yourself in one end or the other. A lot of the time I see projects that start at a reasonable amount because maybe they're in that 300 a square foot range when they're budgeting, but because of the number of comments that come back because the plans weren't prepared properly, and so there was a lot of room for the city to question every little thing and maybe move some walls and maybe change some elements of the foundation, which is kind of catastrophic rewrite. Suddenly all the change orders move you from a budget of 300 much closer to that top end 500. So even in the middle option, sometimes you end up with a fair amount of variance from your budgeting phase, your due diligence phase, to your completion.
I think that's a good point, Ryan. That's why it's important to vet your design team, make sure that they have worked in ADUs before, because there is a lot of specialization, right? Especially right now with the new regulations in terms of what's required. See what they've built before. That's what BuildZig does when we vet vendors, and also not bidding out your project until you've gotten it back from building permit, so you know that what you have is what you can build.
Yeah. It's such a chicken or egg thing in where people are trying to figure out how much their project's going to cost so they can find financing, and so they try to jump straight to that cost phase. But if you don't know the planning, you really want to make sure your costs are all pencil marked, right? Because once the permits come back, it could be a very different project.
Carlos, did you have any thoughts on that? You do a lot of value engineering.
Thoughts on?
on how to get the cost for a project before we've gotten final building permit.
Yeah, we're working right now on getting projects pre-approved in different cities. And different cities are actually working on getting projects pre-approved at planning and building. And then costing them out so that people know ahead of time what a project would cost, at least an estimate, so you have a ballpark idea that if you're going to do this particular ADU over a different ADU, that you have you're clear on the different costs of each. But with respect to any given project without pre-approved plans, we can offer you through a site assessment analysis, basically a cost out based on how many square feet you're looking to do and the site situations. We give you a cost breakdown of your utilities, projected permit fees, foundation costs, utility connection costs, and then at that point it's just really a question of how much, what kind of ADU do you want? Do you want a high-end one or middle or low end? That's one of the benefits of the site assessments.
Holly's got her hand raised, it looks like.
Hi, this is Holly.
Hi, Holly.
Hi. Hi, Laura. I'm wondering in specifically East Bay cities like Berkeley, Oakland, Piedmont, El Cerrito, if you're building a brand new ADU, separate structure from the main house, what are the requirements in terms of lot size coverage? I know in Berkeley and some other cities, you're only allowed a certain percentage of your lot to be covered. Has that changed at all?
Yeah, that has changed with the new California rules in January 2020. So you just have to be mindful of the 4-foot setbacks. And I think that there are rules about, the SB AB 881 removed all lot coverage and floor area ratio requirements as long as you meet those minimum setbacks.
Okay, thank you. And also, is that also, I think I heard that it was, but is it also true that now the ADU can be actually larger than the primary house? Because it used to be that the ADU could only be a certain percentage of the size of the primary house.
The way that the regulations work is that if you have a detached ADU of up to 1,200 square feet and 16 feet high, it has to be allowable if it meets within the setbacks. Then there might be other regulations that would apply for larger units. So is the main dwelling, I guess the main question is the main dwelling smaller than 1,200 square feet?
Yes, it is.
Okay, then you'd still be allowed to have that 1,200 square foot ADU.
Okay, thank you.
I'm happy that those were good. I like those. Those were both examples of where things have really changed in the last couple of months. So
yeah, and I think that's really important. I mean, these ADU rules have been changing for several years now. First starting at the city level and in some cities, and then the state getting on board, and then it's just kind of a never-ending target. So I kind of wanted to get a little more information, if possible, on some of the changes that are new, I believe as of January this year. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I can go over those really quickly since we're still waiting for some questions. But basically what so there were it was a series of, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 laws were enacted that at the state level that impact ADUs. But the main overall concept is that if you fit within these 4-foot setbacks and you're and you meet the size requirements, which is if you're within the structure, you're 800 feet, or if you're a detached ADU, you're 1,200 feet, in both cases 16 feet high. So you meet these dimensions, that the city has to allow it, and they can require that you go through a building submittal process, and they can require that you go through a planning submitting process, but they cannot outlaw these ADUs. So that's the real thing that has been a game changer, because in some in any location, you can have, even if you have a single family home, you can have a JADU, so an ADU within your existing structure, and an additional detached ADU outside of your unit. So basically, it's called the obliteration of single family zoning in California, because if you have like the perfect example where I live is there are a ton of Victorians where they have an entire bottom floor of storage that most people don't use. Or I used to have a house that had a garage that was too small for a car because it was built in the 1930s. And so you convert that unit into that existing space, into a JADU. And then if you also have space in your backyard within these setbacks, you can build another unit as long as they meet those size requirements.
Really quickly, Laura, it looks like Eileen's got her hand raised.
Okay, great.
Hi, I have a kind of a sticking point. Like I feel like I'm stuck right now, and that is because I live in Piedmont, but my backyard was originally zoned in Oakland. Now, since then, I've gone and it looks like, or I've gone to the city of Oakland, and they're saying, oh, well, the new line shows that you're all in Piedmont. Okay, but the property in the back is Oakland, and there is an Oakland sewer easement. So right now I am stuck in that Oakland is telling me that Piedmont should have jurisdiction, but I'm not quite sure who in Oakland has to write to Piedmont that they do have jurisdiction, except for making sure that the sewer lateral is blessed by Oakland. So any recommendation on who I talk to in Oakland to be able to tell Piedmont that they have jurisdiction, even though it looks like the property is in Oakland?
Carlos, do you have any?
Yeah, I would suggest, well, first thing is, I presume you have a survey?
I do have a survey.
Yeah, then I would take that to the zoning supervisor, and there's a couple. One is Aubrey Rose, City of Oakland Planning Department, and then tell him what you need. And generally speaking, they're pretty helpful once we get past this virus matter, of course. But you can even send him an email and explain the situation. I would send him an email and then CC the planner at Piedmont that you're working with. We've worked with Pierce.
Pierce McDonald.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so then just send an email to both of them and say, hi, Aubrey, I'm mostly in Piedmont. Can you just give Piedmont Authority to work with me? And that should take care of the situation for you. At least it'll create the dialogue and the conversation that you need to move forward. They might punch you to someone in another division, but at least it'll get you going.
Now, the one thing is that I don't think the survey outlines whether or not it's Piedmont or Oakland, though. It just gives the lot lines.
Yeah. It's interesting. Do you know where the lot line is?
I do from some of the various different like if I look at some of the different what are they called? Hold on, we're gonna just look at it. Like different parcel maps, right? So if I look at the parcel map, right, it shows pink and green. And so I can see where it's pink and green, but the way the parcel shows is that it's all just one big box. So I don't have a parcel in Oakland, but you can see from the parcel viewer that it's pink and green.
I just sent I sent everyone my email here. If Laura and Ryan want to do likewise, but if you wanted to send me that information, I'm happy to help facilitate resolution.
Okay.
It seems like it's a little bit more technical than we might be able to get to on the surface here.
Okay.
But happy to help facilitate that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That's a great pointed question, though. Thank you.
There's another question here. It says, have you noticed any counties or cities in particular that are leading the pack in making ADU construction easier for homeowners? Laura,
Yeah. Well, so in San Jose, they've created ADU Tuesdays where everybody submits on Tuesdays, and that has made things very easy. In the city of Oakland, they're trying to do the same thing, but they have created a separate page on their website where you can know everything that there is to know about their ADUs, and they are working to have those submittals done online. And we have spoken to the mayor's director of housing, and they have indicated a real interest in getting these built. So overall, there's just a real they're trying to be really thoughtful. In fact, they paid for a overall survey of everybody who built an ADU in the last 2 years in Oakland so that they could understand what the pain points were and try to address them. So they're working on that. So I guess that would be, those would be, and then obviously in Los Angeles, I see that we had somebody from Los Angeles who maybe had left, but they're working on really getting their submittal process outlined. They are experiencing a lot of challenges just because they're geographically so large, and they actually have 5 different planning geographical spaces. So they're trying to get that all lined out. I know that there's a good intent there. They just haven't been able to execute because of their size.
Yeah, currently we're working on somewhere around 15 to 20 ADUs in various cities. Oakland is relatively straightforward and easy to work with. They want to see ADUs happen. Then there's other cities that are along the coast, and you have coastal commission issues. I don't know if that's overridden by the state, Laura, but that's been a challenge in the past. Then we have cities like San Jose, as Laura mentioned, that are really are trying hard to facilitate ADUs. San Diego right now is very challenging. Lines are long, and it's very difficult because they just changed their planning department location. And so it just caused a lot of confusion and breakdown in process. So, but there definitely are some cities that are pushing hard to develop more ADUs, and Oakland and San Jose in the Bay Area being 2 of the better ones. So that was that question. We also had,
Judy asked about neighbor objections.
Yes. So Laura, that's a good one for you.
Yeah. Holly, so neighbors cannot, let's see.
That was Judy asked that.
Oh, Judy. Okay. Oh, I see. I see. You guys are faster readers than hi, Judy. No, if you meet the size requirements and you fit within the parameters of the existing space, or in your case, you're converting an existing unit, they cannot object. These are by right. They have to go through the required process, but they are approved. If you're asking for something that's beyond what is allowed by right, so you're asking for a discretionary approval, the city might ask for neighborhood feedback, and the neighbors could object in that case. So, for instance, if you want to go into the encroach into your setback beyond what's allowable, they might say the neighbors might have an opportunity to object to that if there's a process for that.
Thanks, Laura.
No problem.
Eileen's messaged me and says she has another question.
Oh, okay.
So happy to come back to Eileen. Go for it, Eileen.
Okay, unmuting myself. Okay, so I have a garage that I want to add on, and it's adding on more than the whatever nominal amount that you can do for an easement. Okay. So what I wanted to ask you is, because I need to keep the garage, I mean, almost all intact. Um, how do they do a foundation if there's already a slab for the garage? Can they just, as a builder, can you just add another slab, or what do you do?
Well, can I, before Carlos answers that, can I interject? Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if you need to, why do you need to keep the garage?
Because I have a sewer easement in the back, and if I remove the garage, they're not going to let me build on it, and I'll lose
Because the
5
sewer-
feet in the back.
Oh, because of the sewer, because of your,
Right, because right now the back of my garage is 5 feet, or there's a 5-foot easement in the back of my yard, and the garage, which was built in 1920s, was built on top of that. But when I talked to the public works people in Oakland, unofficially they said, if you take down the garage, we're not going to let you build that on again. But if I convert the garage and I add on to the garage, I'm just curious,
yeah.
how do you do a foundation on that?
Well, if I could, so just one thing in terms of that before Carlos answers his question. So under the the regulations that were passed in January, in general, if you have a garage, even if it's in the setback, it used to be that in order to keep it non-conforming, you had to keep a certain number of walls, and people did a lot of stuff in order to keep that non-conforming status. In terms of the new ADU laws, now you'd be able to demolish that, completely demolish that that old garage and rebuild it within the existing proportions without losing that non-conforming status. I don't know how that would apply in an easement context, in the context of a sewer easement, but I think it's worth having that discussion with that with the city before kind of going to the next solution. But I'll let Carlos answer his question.
So I wasn't clear on the issue of putting a slab on top of a slab. If that could be clarified for me.
I actually don't know. I just don't know how you would do it. Would you put a slab on a slab, or would you just take
Is the
some
issue
of that?
that you're trying to figure out if the slab for the existing garage is strong enough for a living unit?
So, so the slab, or sorry, the garage would be converted to bedroom, bathroom, and then the additional part of the ADU would be more the living and the kitchen and stuff. But if you were to tell me that, if you just left it as a big bedroom and storage, that there wouldn't be a problem like adding the foundation next to it so that you're not touching the garage foundation, or at least, I mean,
It
I
sounds
just
like
don't.
you're trying to do part conversion, part bump out.
Yes.
Add a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm almost positive that if I tear it down, they are not going to let me build on that easement.
Yeah. Without seeing the project, I'm sorry, Ryan, were you still commenting?
No, go for it.
Okay. Without seeing the project, it sounds like you probably don't want to tear down your garage. It's easy enough to strengthen your walls and build a slab and add some footings. In general, you can certainly add a slab and footings beneath your existing, or replace your existing footings that are holding up the walls of the garage. Again, this is without seeing it, but and then you can add and just tie in a slab into an existing slab if you already have a slab.
Oh, okay.
But I'd want to see exactly the situation in a little bit more detail to be able to advise you. But we've done some pretty complicated things: added footings, added slabs, connected slabs to other slabs, did underpinning of existing footings. We just would need to. And we've done it without having to remove existing walls. You just shore up the existing walls and floor. in this case ceiling. So we just have to take a look at it though and figure out how to do it, but it's generally pretty straightforward.
Okay, thank you.
Good questions. All right, and we've got another one from Judy coming in. It says, what if your foundation is brick or appears to be brick?
Yeah, so if you're going from, say, a garage to you want to create to an accessory dwelling unit, now the code requires that you build something that will protect human lives instead of car lives. And so you'll have to upgrade your brick foundation to have structural integrity for residential use. And so in that case, we would have to shore your walls and your ceiling above, and then put in, remove your brick foundation and put in concrete footings. It's possible to do other ways of, like you could just build within it, leave your bricks in place and build within the existing walls and put in a new footing, but generally speaking, it's not worth it. You're better off just shoring everything up and putting in a new foundation, perimeter footings and slab.
Great. Well, I think I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Couldn't figure out how to send my email, but maybe Carlos or Ryan can send my email as well. I wanted to talk quickly about next steps. So you have our emails if you have questions. If you'd like to, one of the products that we have at BuildZig, that we're partnering with How2ADU to do, is help folks with a site assessment. That site assessment includes an inspector coming out to your project and us giving you a cost assessment of how much it would cost to construct your project, and the utilities and the permitting process and cost for you. Normally that we charge $500 for that project, but as in partnership with How2ADU, and because you are all on this call today, if you sign up in the next week, we would offer that for you at cost, which would be $250. A lot of the questions that you have, we would be able to research and address through that. It would give you a baseline understanding of what you would need to get through your due diligence process and know what to do next. But otherwise, if you have questions, you can definitely reach out to us. The other thing that we will be doing, I think, with How2ADU is continuing to have these calls. So as you do your research, please reach out to Ryan and let him know if you want other experts on in terms of financing, or if you want to do a deep dive into construction costs. It would be great to know that, so that we can partner with him with How2ADU in order to get you that information.
Laura, has everybody here received a sample of our site assessment?
I don't know, but we can definitely do that. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
So what we'll
just.
do after, oh, go for it, Carlos.
I was going to say, typically what we do is we look at your buildable area. An inspector will go by, look at your panels, all your metering, your electrical panel. We look at the best place to do addition of the ADU. You may already know, but we'll lay out the area in the backyard, or if you're doing a backyard, or we'll look at your garage or your basement. And then we'll write up a whole report on what we anticipate the feasibility to be, as well as the cost of all your connections, your applications, your foundation, and your project. And these are at estimate level. So the accuracy is at estimate level, not at a hard bid level. But it gives you a good sense of what your possibilities are. And it's a good kind of first step in without having to spend too much money.
Eileen's asked specifically who's the best person to reach out to, and we've popped Laura's email address into the chat. Honestly, you can reach out to any of us. I'll obviously put you guys in touch. That's why I introduced you to BuildZig in the first place. But feel free to reach out directly to Carlos or Laura, and they'd be happy to schedule that site assessment for you.
Great. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Ryan, for introducing us all. We look forward to continuing this discussion with everyone.
Yeah. And then also just open to feedback about the webinar. I think a lot of you showed up, so I'm really excited, if nothing else, to see some faces other than my own in the mirror during this shelter in place. And it means a lot to me. There's a lot of you who are quiet, so I hope we helped. I think we had some write-in questions that we'll get back to you in writing if we didn't cover it in the meeting. And just give me feedback. Reply to any of the emails you received about the Zoom. Let me know if it went well, if it went poorly, if there were things that you wish we talked about. We'll be doing more of these, and we'd love to have some themes that we know are relevant to your projects. Cost is a big subject. If there's specific elements within that you want us to dive into, that's the kind of thing we'd love to do for you. We will. I see another private question. We will also send out a copy of the site assessment to everybody who registered for the meeting, as well as a recording of the meeting, and that way you can see if you missed an answer. I see some people diligently taking notes, but others will benefit from the recording. Thank you guys so much. It really means a lot to us to be able to talk face to face.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna unmute everybody so we can say goodbye properly. But it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a wonderful evening.
Yay.
Not a problem.
Yeah.